Hi, I'm Bani Sujata. Welcome to Dharma Threads. I'm here with Simon Power to discuss a verse from the Theragatha, the verses of the senior monks. You can read this verse on Sutta Central if you like. So the verse for this session will be 1.112, Vachagota. Vachagota, a word meaning from the family or the clan of Vacha. Vachagota is quite a common name in the suttas. There's actually a whole, not only several larger suttas with Vachagota in the Majjhima Nikaya, even a whole collection, a whole Samyutta in the Samyutta Nikaya. As a clan name, it's quite possible that there were different individuals called Vachagota. On the other hand, there's no reason to think that this Vachagota is not the same person as we find in the many discussions in the suttas. One difference, though, is that in the discussions in the prose suttas, Vachagota is sort of characterized by kind of a lot of doubt, a lot of questioning, and it's very much a kind of a charting of his spiritual journey, whereas here it's a celebration of enlightenment. So here's Vachagota's verse. I have the three knowledges. I'm a great meditator, skilled in serenity of mind. I've realized my own true goal and fulfilled the Buddha's instructions. So, not lacking in self-confidence, right? Here Vachagota is making that kind of bold and very sort of clear claim to his own spiritual progress. This is a kind of verse which sometimes would be said by different monks to the Buddha. In some cases they were sort of said sort of very directly like this. There's some other interesting ones where monks would declare it more kind of indirectly rather than saying, you know, I have this attainment. They would say, you know, so, a monk who practices in that way sort of realizes this kind of attainment, and they don't actually mention the fact that it's them that they're talking about. But here, Vachagota doesn't have any of that kind of reticence. He's just straight out saying he has the three knowledges. Okay, so the three knowledges in Pali is the Te Vidya, and the Te Vidya is one of the most common descriptions of that kind of high spiritual attainment which we find throughout the Buddhist texts. The recollection of past lives, the clairvoyance or the power to see beings being reborn according to their karma, and finally the knowledge of the ending of defilements, asavakkhaya jnana. And of those three knowledges, it's really only the last which is of course essential to the Buddhist path, but all three of those knowledges are mentioned very, very frequently, so it clearly was a quite important part of what people were doing. So he's a great meditator, practitioner of jhana, skilled in serenity of mind, and his own true goal, right, is a saddhatha, the sort of being an idiom for realizing enlightenment or awakening. And the idea that you fulfill the Buddha's instructions is a common common phrase that we find throughout the Theragatha. And so it's the idea that the Buddha has this anusasana, this instruction. Remember that the Buddha's last words, you know, this is my instruction for you. Vaya dhamma sankhara apamadena sampadeta. Or conditions fall apart, practice diligently. And this is his final instruction. So this is these words of people who said that they've actually done what their teachers asked them to do, practice in accordance, and then reach the end of that road. So Simon, what did you feel about this sutta? What response did you have to it?
I selected this one because there's many of these kind of boasts of attainment throughout the text. Yeah. And this one in particular seemed almost unseemly in the boast. I'm a great meditator. Yeah. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that, about the pride that's very obvious in this verse. Yeah. And why it's okay to be so boastful and proud of these attainments. And so maybe if you could answer that question, I'll have another question in a second.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think in English we sort of struggle a lot with the notion of pride, and in the Western context, pride is something which is the devil, right? Quite literally, right? I mean, Satan fell from heaven because of his pride, you know, thinking that you were capable of being as good as God. And so there's almost this kind of idealization of humility in all circumstances, right? So in Buddha's point of view of pride is more nuanced, right? And you have the three kinds of conceit. Is the conceit I'm superior, the conceit I'm inferior, and the conceit we are equal, right? Now, so that's a much more subtle kind of thing, isn't it? So all of those things have to be overcome. But of course, each one of those sort of has the inherent idea of like comparing and judging oneself with others, right? Even if you're judging yourself to be equal or even lesser. So pride as such is like identifying with yourself and all of these kinds of things. But there's a difference between saying, think of someone like Muhammad Ali, for example, right? He could say, I'm the greatest. He was. Is that a boast, or is it just a statement of fact, right? So here, I mean, to me, if you look at the motivation of it, why is Vajragota speaking in this way? So, assuming that he's correct, that he is actually enlightened, then he's speaking in a way that's inspirational, that's sharing the joy of his attainment with others, and with an intention to sort of encourage others to practice and realize that the path is also, it works. Yeah. People have different kind of response to this. Some people read things like that and they go, they find it depressing, it feels almost so alien to them to have attained these things. Whereas other people feel quite inspired by them. So it really depends on the context.
And in terms of that context, who would have been listening to these kind of poems celebrating attainments and enlightenment?
I presume that the audience would have been the monks at the time. Again, we're not really told, who the audience is, so we have to guess. But typically, that you'd expect this would be something that would be spoken of within the circle of the monks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you referred to the final line, and fulfilled the Buddha's instructions, which relates to the Buddha's final words.
Yeah.
So does this show the very strong link between the early suttas, where these words of the Buddha are recorded, and these poems?
Sure, yeah. I mean, they're inhabiting the same world, doctrinally, linguistically, and so on. So it's referring to the same thing. So the Buddha came and his instructions were very clear and repeated many, many times. And when you read the prose suttas, he's repeating these core teachings again and again and again. It's very prominent in something like the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, where he goes from town to town, and each town he teaches Sila, Samadhi, Panya. This is what the path is, and keeps repeating it in different forms in different places. Yeah.
But it also shows, doesn't it, that these very early Buddhists were very familiar with the teachings.
Yes. Yeah.
They hadn't yet been recorded or written down.
Yeah, there's a lot of, throughout the Therigatha verses, there's a lot of assumed knowledge about what the teachings are and what the suttas are. And even though, yes, they didn't have libraries, they didn't have books, all of those things, but they still seem to have a pretty good knowledge often of what the suttas were. I mean, it's quite common that somebody will refer to a particular verse and say, well, the Buddha said such and such verse in such and such place, and what does that mean? And then they'll discuss that. But they all kind of assume that they all know that verse, right? They might have different interpretations of it, but they all know that. So it's definitely seems to be in the case that those early texts were actually well known among the community from an early time. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Thanks a lot, Simon, and thanks for watching. And I hope to see you for the next Dhamma Thread session.